This video is lesson 22 of the Hands-On Equations learning system. And in this lesson, you're going to solve equations that contain multiples of parenthetical expressions. At the top of the screen, you'll see our first example. So here is our parenthetical expression. So we have 2 times the quantity x minus 1 plus 4 star equals x plus a negative 8. Remember that this expression right here will use the distributive property. We're going to distribute the 2 to the x and to subtracting 1. So that means we have 2 x's, and then we're going to subtract 1 twice, which means we'll subtract 2. When we set this up, we're going to go into the parentheses and we're going to do x minus 1, and then we're going to do that twice. So here's my x. Now I want to subtract 1 from x. The only way I can do that is to create a 0 pair and then subtract 1, a positive 1. And then I want to do this twice, so that just means I need to double everything that I had up there. Now if we look at what I wrote in red right here, it makes it look like this is a little bit different, because right here we have 2x plus negative 2, and this says 2x minus 2. Well, if we were to model 2x minus 2, we'd set up the 2 x's right here, but then we wouldn't be able to set up subtracting 2 without putting a 0 pair and then subtracting 2. And notice that what we end up with, 2x and a negative 2, is exactly the same thing as what I set up right here, 2x and a negative 2. To continue setting this up, we also need to add 4 stars. I'm just going to have to kind of do these below. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll move these up a little bit so we can see everything and move these over. On the other side, we have an x and then a negative 8. And there are multiple legal moves that we can make, but I think I'm going to start right here with these 0 pairs, because I see a 0 pair with the star and the x, and then another one with this star and this x right above it. So I'm going to remove those 0 pairs that have no value. Let me now rearrange my setup here. Next, I'm going to remove 2 of the negative 1s from both sides. So I'm going to remove these 2 negative 1s, and then I need to do the same thing from the 8. So if I remove 2 of those, I have 6 negatives. And then lastly, I want to try to get rid of this blue pawn, because I want the number cubes on one side and then the pawns on the other side. To get rid of this blue pawn, I'm going to add a star to both sides, which will create a 0 pair right here, and that 0 pair then can be removed. So now I have 3 star equals negative 6, so I'm asking myself what times 3 is 6, and 2 times 3 is 6, and that will be negative 2, because this was a negative 6. And if star is negative 2, x is positive 2. To complete our check, we're going to set up our original equation. And in our original equation, we had 2x minus 2. That was after we distributed the 2 to the x and to the 1. So we needed 2 x's, and then we needed to subtract 2. To do that, we added a 0 pair, then subtracted a 2. Then we also had 4 stars, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we had an x and a negative 8. We now need to substitute our values. So star was negative 2, and x had a value of positive 2. On the left-hand side, we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 negatives. And then 2 of those negatives are going to be canceled out, so we're now back to 8 negatives. And then 2 more are going to be canceled out, so we're at 6 negatives for a total on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we have 8 negatives, but 2 of them are going to be canceled out by these 2 positives. So we're also at 6 negatives on the right-hand side. So our check, negative 6 equals negative 6. Here's another example. We have 2 times the quantity 2x minus 4 plus star, and that should be equal to 2 plus 2 star. I'm going to always start setting up the parentheses first, and then look outside the parentheses and see if I need to do it more than one time. So I have 2x's, and I want to subtract 4 from those 2x's. I don't have 4 to subtract, so I'm going to have to make a 0 pair and then subtract 4. Now I want to do what was in the parentheses twice. So all I need to do is place another 2x and a negative 4. And then we also need 1 star on this side. So I'll squeeze in 1 more star over here. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to put all of my x's and numbers together, and then I'll squeeze in the star right over here. On the other side, we have 2 plus 2 stars. Now we're ready to make our legal moves, and the first one that stands out to me is to remove a star from each side. So I can do this, remove these at the same time. That doesn't change the value of our equation. Next, I think I'm going to try to remove the star over here because I want to get variables on one side and numbers on the other, and I've got a whole bunch of variables over here. It's going to be hard to remove all of those. It's not too hard to remove just one. So in order to remove this star, I'm going to create a 0 pair over here by adding an x to both sides. Now that I have this 0 pair on the right-hand side, I can remove the 0 pair that's worth nothing. And now I want to get rid of the numbers that are on the left-hand side so that I have my variables on the left and my numbers on the right. To get rid of these two 4s, and these two 4s really are an 8, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and trade them in for an 8 so it doesn't look like that they're two separate numbers. To get rid of those, I'm going to add a positive 8 to both sides and create a 0 pair on the left-hand side. So now that I've created a 0 pair on the left-hand side, I can remove that 0 pair that has a value of nothing. And now I have on the left 5 x's and on the right 10. So 5 times what is 10? 5 times 2 is 10. And if x is 2, star is negative 2. Let's now complete the check, and I'm going to reset everything to my original state. So my original state was 2 x's, and then I wanted to subtract 4. I had to add a 0 pair, then subtract a positive 4, and then I needed to double this because of the distributive property, and I needed to double everything that was in the parentheses. And then I had a plus star, and on the other side 2 plus 2 star. So there was my original setup. And remember that, again, that in the parentheses here, we were distributing this 2 to everything in the parentheses. So we had 2 groups of 2x's and 2 groups of 4, and then we wanted to subtract that 4, and that's why we ended up with negative 4s, 2 groups of negative 4s. Okay, now we're ready to substitute our values for our pieces. X had a value of positive 2, and star had a value of negative 2. So all together on the right hand or on the left hand side, we have negative 10 right here, and then we have positive 8 right here. So if we have 8 positives and 10 negatives, 8 of those positives, those 8 positives will cancel out 8 of the negatives, and we'll be left with 2 negatives. And on the left or on the right hand side, we have 4 negatives and then just 2 positives. Those 2 positives will cancel out 2 of those negatives. So those right there, and we're left with 2 negatives. So our check, negative 2 equals negative 2. So in problems that have parentheses and require you to apply the distributive property, make sure that you set up the expression that is inside the parentheses, then look outside the parentheses, and that will tell you how many times you need to set up that expression. In this case, it was 2 times. Because when you are distributing this number that is outside the parentheses, you are multiplying it by all of the terms that are in the parentheses.